Well, what I've said is I don't believe that we've had enough jobs created and industrial benefits done out of the F-35 contract. I think it's not enough. I think Canadians expect more, and we should get more. I know that Canadians want us to build more in Canada, build with Canadian jobs, and that's what I'm pushing for.
Canada just sent one of its clearest signals yet that the age of quiet obedience in North American defense procurement is over. Standing in front of reporters, Industry Minister Mélanie Joly delivered a line that would have been unthinkable a decade ago, and one that exploded across Canada's political landscape. She said Canada didn't get enough from the F-35 program, and for the first time in years, Ottawa is openly considering a fighter jet that is not American. This is not a routine procurement update. This is a strategic shift and potentially the biggest challenge Canada has launched toward U.S. defense dominance in decades.
When it comes to the Gripen, of course, we're really interested in seeing what can be done. 10,000 jobs is indeed a very interesting offer.
The debate reignited the moment Saab's executives arrived in Ottawa to showcase the Gripen E fighter jet. Their pitch was direct and daring. The Gripen could be assembled in Canada, supported by Canada's existing aerospace expertise, and backed by an offer of up to 10,000 Canadian jobs in manufacturing and research. They didn't just bring a plane, they brought an industrial partnership, a vision of Canada rebuilding its defense manufacturing capacity, and a product specifically designed for the brutal Arctic environments where Canadian pilots actually fly. By contrast, Canada's current F-35 arrangement, negotiated under previous governments, has produced far fewer industrial benefits than what Ottawa expected. The F-35 is unquestionably sophisticated, but it is also dependent on U.S.-controlled supply chains, expensive to maintain, and optimized for theaters of conflict far from the Canadian North. Joly did not try to sugarcoat any of this. She stood at the microphone and said clearly, "Canadians expect more, and we should get more." Her comments landed at a moment when the broader political environment is shifting. The United States, under President Donald Trump, continues to pressure allies with unpredictable tariffs and sudden trade escalations. Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, is redefining its role in the global economy, prioritizing domestic production and pursuing strategic partnerships beyond Washington. Suddenly, a fighter jet deal signed years ago has become a symbol of a deeper question. Should Canada continue to buy American defense platforms when the political relationship is this volatile?
Canada's willingness to question the F-35 program reflects a larger national transformation. For decades, Canada's defense procurement followed an unwritten rule: buying American was safe. It aligned Canada with NORAD, simplified logistics, and reduced political risk. But the world of 2025 is not the world of the early 2000s. Trump's aggressive use of tariffs, pressure tactics, and America First policies has forced Ottawa to confront a reality that was once ignored: dependency comes with vulnerability. Joly's statement is not just frustration over job numbers. It is a public rejection of a mindset that viewed the United States as the automatic answer to every major defense question. Canada wants deals that produce real industrial benefits, not symbolic participation. It wants supply chains that support Canadian workers, not a system where billions of dollars leave the country while only a fraction returns. And most of all, it wants strategic leverage at a time when American policy can shift overnight. Saab's proposal represents something the United States never offered: genuine industrial partnership. The Swedes are proposing a model in which Canada doesn't just buy jets. Canada builds them, repairs them, trains on them, and incorporates them into a domestic aerospace ecosystem. That aligns perfectly with Carney's broader economic strategy, which emphasizes domestic production, supply chain independence, and a dramatic expansion of Canadian manufacturing across key sectors. There is also the geographic reality. Canadian pilots don't operate out of Nevada deserts or Mediterranean climates. They operate in places where -40 is normal, where runways freeze, and where snow can ground an aircraft in minutes.
The Gripen was engineered for exactly that. It can land on highways and icy surfaces, turn around quickly, and operate reliably in extreme cold.
These are not small advantages. They go straight to the heart of Canadian defense needs: the Arctic, sovereignty patrols, NORAD modernization, and rapid response missions in remote regions. Meanwhile, the F-35 is a fifth-generation powerhouse, but it was designed for global strike missions, carrier integration, and joint operations across the Pacific. Its maintenance footprint is heavy. Its cold-weather performance has been questioned repeatedly, and every upgrade, every part, and every software patch flows through U.S. channels. In a time when economic and political tensions are rising, that dependency is increasingly uncomfortable. But the stakes extend far beyond performance or maintenance. At the core of this debate is an uncomfortable economic truth. Canada has spent billions on the F-35 and received disproportionately little in return. American aerospace firms benefit, American workers benefit, American supply chains benefit. Canadian suppliers participate, but at levels far below what was promised at the start of the program. When Joly said, "We didn't get enough," she wasn't speaking casually. She was summarizing 2 decades of frustration inside Canadian aerospace industry. If Ottawa were to walk away from the F-35, the geopolitical consequences would be enormous. Washington would see it as a major breach of alignment. Trump, who has already used tariffs as punishment tools, would almost certainly respond. Lockheed Martin would launch an aggressive lobbying campaign, and U.S. lawmakers would frame Canada's decision as a betrayal of the defense alliance. The symbolic meaning of such a move would echo far beyond North America. It would signal that even long-standing U.S. partners now feel the need to diversify away from American defense systems. In Europe and Asia, this trend is already underway. Countries are building their own fighter jets, forming new defense alliances, and resisting Washington's attempts to preserve dominance over military procurement. Canada, considering the Gripen, places it firmly inside this global wave, a wave defined by multipolarity, industrial sovereignty, and strategic independence.
The real question now is not which jet should Canada buy. The real question is what kind of country does Canada want to be? A country that automatically buys American equipment out of habit, or a country that demands real value, real jobs, real independence, and walks away when those expectations are not met? Joly's message signals a new era in Canadian foreign and defense policy, one that matches Carney's broader shift toward economic diversification and strategic autonomy. Saab's Gripen may or may not become Canada's future fighter, but the political meaning of this moment is unmistakable. Canada is no longer afraid to challenge the assumptions that once defined its relationship with the United States. What happens next could reshape not just Canada's Air Force, but Canada's place in a rapidly changing world. The final decision will determine whether Canada steps confidently into a new era of independence or whether it remains tied to a system that no longer reflects its national interests. Canada is quietly reshaping the balance of power in North American defense. While Washington insists that Ottawa finalize its commitment to the F-35, Prime Minister Mark Carney is taking the debate in an entirely different direction, slowing the process, questioning long-held assumptions, and backing a Canadian-built alternative where it matters most. This isn't hesitation, it's a strategic reset. For more than a decade, Canadian governments have treated the F-35 like an unavoidable destiny, a choice that simply had to be made because everyone else in NATO seemed ready to fly it. But the landscape has changed. Carney's government has reopened the evaluation process, extending the timeline, widening the analysis, and placing Sweden's Gripen E back on the table. This unexpected revival of the competition caught Washington off guard. Inside the U.S., officials in the Trump administration are becoming visibly impatient. Analysts close to the Pentagon have described Canada's pace as disruptive and inconvenient, especially as NORAD planning for the Arctic enters a critical phase. But Ottawa, for the first time in years, is unapologetically taking its time. The Carney government insists that Canada will not be rushed, pressured, or boxed into a multi-decade fighter commitment based on another country's political calendar. There are several reasons why Canada is slowing down, and almost all of them are rooted in today's political reality. Trump's second term has brought tariff volatility, supply chain friction, and a clear willingness to use economic coercion against allies. With that backdrop, signing a massive U.S. defense contract without careful evaluation would be reckless. A fighter jet program lasts 40 years. A bad policy out of Washington can last a weekend. The alternative on the table, Sweden's Gripen, is no longer seen as a symbolic protest option. Defense planners note that Gripen was designed for operations in harsh climates, from frozen runways to remote bases, conditions that mirror the Canadian Arctic more closely than those of most NATO countries. Gripen maintenance crews can operate with smaller teams and simpler equipment, and the aircraft's turnaround time is significantly faster in contested or dispersed environments. These are practical advantages for a nation that must defend vast territory, not just dense airspaces near European borders. Still, the F-35 has its own undeniable strengths: unmatched stealth capability, advanced sensor fusion, and deep interoperability with NATO allies. The question is not which aircraft is better when placed under a microscope. The question is which aircraft aligns most closely with Canada's long-term interests, not America's immediate expectations. And that is the heart of the Carney government's entire approach. Carney is building a doctrine of strategic autonomy. Canada will work with the United States, but not as a passive junior partner. It will evaluate American systems, but it will also consider alternatives. Most importantly, it will not allow Washington, especially under a president whose policies shift aggressively from month to month, to dictate decisions that shape Canada's defense posture for decades. This is why the F-35 debate no longer exists in a vacuum. It sits inside a broader shift in how Canada understands sovereignty. And the clearest evidence of that shift appears in the second half of this story. Just as the Americans increased public pressure over the fighter program, Carney's government announced a decision that dramatically reframed the conversation. Ottawa approved a major purchase of 6 Bombardier Global 6500 aircraft for the Royal Canadian Air Force, a deal worth more than $700 million. These jets will replace the aging fleet of Challenger aircraft and serve a wide range of missions: medical evacuations, humanitarian response, command and control operations, and Arctic deployments. But the true significance goes far beyond their role in the sky. Every one of these aircraft is designed and assembled in Canada. More than 60 domestic suppliers contribute to the program. Hundreds of highly skilled Canadian jobs will be supported. For the first time in years, a major defense procurement is doubling as an industrial strategy to strengthen Canada's own aerospace backbone. This is where Carney's approach becomes unmistakable. Instead of responding to U.S. impatience by accelerating an American purchase, he responded by investing in Canadian capability. At a moment when the United States is escalating tariffs and applying pressure at the negotiating table, Ottawa chose to reinforce its own industrial foundations rather than deepen its dependency. The Bombardier decision is a quiet but powerful statement. It demonstrates that Canada is perfectly willing to spend on defense, but not automatically in the direction Washington prefers. It also proves that Canada can build world-class aircraft of its own, and that maintaining this domestic expertise is itself a core component of national security. A country that cannot manufacture its own advanced airframes becomes vulnerable, not just militarily, but economically. For the United States, the optics are uncomfortable. Washington has grown accustomed to allies who default to American equipment. Seeing a G7 country and a neighboring NORAD partner assert its independence is a reminder that American leverage isn't what it used to be. It is even more striking given the timing, arriving just months before the 2026 USMCA review, where leverage will matter more than rhetoric. Carney's emerging doctrine is becoming clear. Diversify trade partners, diversify defense partners, support domestic industries, and avoid putting all strategic eggs in the Washington basket. Canada is not turning away from the United States, but it is making sure that partnership does not become dependence. In a world where alliances are tested by political volatility, that is not just smart policy, it is survival. By reopening the fighter jet debate and refusing to bend to U.S. pressure, Carney has signaled that Canada will define its military future on its own terms. And by investing nearly $1 billion into Bombardier, he has shown that defense procurement can double as an industrial renaissance that strengthens sovereignty at home. Canada now stands at a crossroads that is bigger than F-35 versus Gripen. It is a moment where the country must decide whether its defense posture will be shaped by old assumptions or by the realities of a new geopolitical era. So here's the question for viewers. Should Canada lock itself into the US-built F-35 or embrace a strategy that preserves maximum independence for the decades ahead? And perhaps the more important question is this: are we witnessing the moment Canada steps out of America's shadow and begins building a defense identity that finally stands on its own?